a little bit about the series. This is the second in 4 sessions, and we have 2 office hours as well. The first one will be on Monday at this same time of day, and you'll receive information about that. This series is put on by the Rural Power Coalition. The reason why we're running this series is because we recognize that there's still a huge amount of potential in rural electric cooperatives that is not yet tapped. And basically, um, electric co-ops have a lot more, there's a lot more leverage that member owners can use than if you pay like I do to a private utility or like as Tom was mentioning. There's just a lot less maneuverability and a lot less receptivity to ratepayers if you pay to a private utility or even municipal. One thing with electric co-ops that is kind of interesting and maybe surprising is more than half of the United States' landmass is covered by electric co-ops, and about 1 in 8 people are co-op member owners. So what we have found as the Rural Power Coalition is that a lot of times people don't know that they're member owners, and when they do know, it can be challenging to get more involved than just kind of like the minimal level of knowing when the elections are. And one kind of like analogy is being a co-op member is a little bit like being a constituent, where being a constituent of a local elected official, where your co-op board is at least supposed to represent your needs and interest. And if you are a member owner, the way it's supposed to work is your utility works for you. So it's energy democracy structurally, but of course there are things that need to be um, it needs to be maintained. There are things that sometimes need to be improved, and so that's why this series is being run. This second session is specifically about the kind of like internal workings of electric co-ops. And so today we have 4 presenters. We have Eugene Strowbridge of CURE in Minnesota, Dave Munk, who is a board member with Holy Cross Energy and former board chair there. And then Bri Knisley of Appalachian Voices, and then Kyle Kreider of the People's Justice Council. Since we do have a good amount to get through, I will not go on for much longer about, our piece, the Rural Power Coalition and the series. I will hand it off um, to Eugene.
Hi everyone, I'm Eugene Strowbridge. I work for CURE, a rural environmental advocacy org based in Minnesota. I'm based in Bemidji, Minnesota. I'm new to REC organizing, but I've done a lot of other kinds of organizing in the past, specifically in rural communities, and I've always been a huge fan of cooperatives. And one of the things that excites me the most about organizing around RECs is due to their strong reliance on cooperative principles, you can achieve a higher degree of change relatively quickly because you're not just a member or a constituent, you're a member owner. You have a real stake in that organization and therefore more leverage. Um, One thing that I've noticed so far in my work is that sometimes change at the REC level is as simple as showing up and asking questions of the board and other members, getting a feel for how does the co-op work? Why does it work that way? And is that actually working for the people that it's supposed to serve? Member owners often come together and get organized due to a specific issue, whether that's increased transparency, maybe their bills are just too high, or maybe there's a desire to put solar panels on your roof. Um, However it gets started, these campaigns for change often have this ripple effect where people are getting involved, they're learning more about their co-op, they're getting more engaged, and then that can lead to progressive change in other areas as well. So I wanted to provide some examples of what's possible with co-op organizing, and I found 3 examples that I thought were really instructive. The first is Tri-County Electric Co-op in South Carolina. Around 2018, it had some of the highest electricity rates in the state, but it came to light that the board had been quietly raising their salaries for a number of years. When it was noticed, their salaries were actually twice the national average. The chair was making 80K a year, and their members were piling on excess travel expenses. I think at one point they actually did a Civil War battlefield tour on the time of the member owners. And they were also kind of manipulating the rules. They got compensated based on the number of meetings they held. So they were scheduling extremely short meetings almost every day during certain periods of time so that they could rack up the bonus. By the time member owners got involved, an attorney and the National Co-op Association had already raised the issue with them and recommended that they implement these rules to limit pay. And what the board did as a response was to get friends and family to lobby against those proposed changes. So those failed. Board members resigned, I think 2 of them, and members who were getting involved realized that there was this lack of transparency that prevented them from learning more or even from running, because the board nominated or put together a nominating committee and they just filled it with their friends and family who would then nominate them and they would retain their seat. By the time the membership was calling for emergency meetings to address this, the board had decided they weren't going to show up to those. And finally, at an annual general meeting, the membership voted 1,452 to 30 to remove the board. They also voted to approve new bylaws. And following that, South Carolina passed a reform law that is mandating more transparency and state oversight for co-ops. And that law was actually written and I think partially written and helped pass by the Electric Co-op Association of South Carolina because they were made to look pretty bad. They had a co-op that was just completely and blatantly abusing the rules to kind of line their own pockets. And so that wasn't good for them either. And I think Tri-County is a really good example of how much you can accomplish and how quickly you can make that happen when co-op membership is more informed and engaged. Because once those walls around the information started to come down and transparency allowed these facts to come to light, things turned around pretty quickly. The next example that I wanted to talk about quickly is Roanoke Electric Co-op in North Carolina. They're largely Black membership, organized for board representation for years and won a majority of seats in 1970. In 1981, they defeated an incumbent board member for the first time. And in 97, they elected Curtis Wynn, a Black man, as CEO. And it was just kind of like this rolling snowball. They just kept at it. And eventually, we're now in a place where Roanoke is recognized as being exemplary in service to their members. They have an upgrade to saved program for on-bill financing. They have broadband program, a community center, and a program that provides education on forestry and sustainability to Black landowners to help improve land retention. So Roanoke is a really good example of what co-ops can be when boards represent their membership and the membership is active and engaged and stays that way for a long time. And I think it serves as a good lesson as well that, when you're organizing for change at your co-op and you get a victory, you don't let up or, go back to being uninvolved. You keep on the pressure and you keep going and making it better and better. After all, you do own it. It's your co-op. So the last example that I wanted to talk about is Tri-State Generation and Transmission Co-op in Colorado. Tri-State provides power for many of the electric co-ops in Colorado, and about 30% of Coloradans get their power from them. In the 2000s, the cost of renewables was falling, and Tri-State decided to double down on its reliance on coal-fired power plants. So people's power bills were some of the highest in the state, but because of the contracts with Tri-State, they weren't able to develop renewable power even when it would decrease costs for members. So transmission co-ops that had contracts with Tri-State started leaving or announcing their intention to leave because they wanted to get their power from a provider who wasn't going to limit them in that way. They wanted to develop more renewables and shift the reliance away from coal and lower the power bills. Pressure from members for Tri-State reform and co-op boards led to Tri-State's Responsible Energy Plan, that was their title for it, which included decarbonization goals, shuttering of their coal-fired plants, as well as rate reductions for members. And today, Members for Tri-State Reform now works to unite member owners across Colorado. Tri-State is still in a very shaky place as far as I can tell. Many co-ops are still threatening to leave their umbrella, but I think the reform efforts really showed what's possible when you have coordination between member owners, advocacy groups, and responsive board members. It's possible even to challenge some of the largest co-op entities that shape our access to energy and win. So in closing, I just wanted to say that I think co-ops and organizing around RECs are really exciting, and they provide us with a space to practice democracy, flex power in a way that's more responsive than a lot of other types of organizing, I think. I think it's common for people to show up passionate for change, and then they kind of learn more about the energy it's going to take and the obstacles in their way, and excitement kind of drains and wanes. And I think that's less true in the co-op world, at least in my limited experience, because there's so much more responsiveness there and capacity for change. A little engagement and a few questions can go a long way, but consistent and sustained organization and just being at the table is what works best, like we saw with Roanoke Co-op. So I just wanted to thank you guys for joining us today, and I will hand it off to Bri.
Thank you, Eugene. Those were great examples. I love that you pulled them. And also just want to appreciate how valuable it is that you come from a rural organizing background. It's a totally different flavor from organizing in more heavily populated areas. And I know that the first session of this training, focused on rural organizing with some other great experts. So just really appreciate that. I'm Bri Knisley. I am the Director of Public Power Campaigns for Appalachian Voices. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm based in Knoxville, Tennessee. I've been doing some form of electric cooperative work for about 9 years now, and I started out in my role at AV doing organizing in the field with member owners who were working on campaigns. It's been a while since I've done that work, but I'm based in Knoxville, Tennessee now. And I did most of my work in kind of East Tennessee with member owners. My background in my background though, I'm from rural Ohio. I grew up in like a 1,200 person town where my family's been for 5 generations, and my parents are member owners of electric co-ops. I am currently at a hotel at a conference, and I'm on hour 11 of sitting in a really uncomfortable chair. So I hope you all can bear with me through this presentation, but I'm really excited to talk with you all about understanding your co-op. And if one of the presenters could pull up my slides, I can get into that. There we go. Great. So whether you're here because there's some specific issue, that's caused some agitation and is now, the galvanizing thing that you're organizing at your co-op, or maybe you're here because you want to see your co-op implement some specific programs. Regardless, there are a few questions that you can answer to better understand your co-op and what needs improvement, and also understand where are the points of leverage where you can have some influence as a member owner. Also, just thinking back to the examples that Eugene gave, I love the Roanoke example. Totally true that everybody talks about Roanoke Electric Cooperative in North Carolina when we think of the good guys who are doing it really well. And the fact that that organizing goes back so many decades from the member owners, I think is just a really incredible example. And I'll also say that the CEO of that co-op, Curtis Wynn, went on to be the first Black president of the National Rural Electric Cooperative Association, which was also really impactful. there were a lot of important things that happened when Curtis was in that role as well. And in fact, I'll see if we can share out. There's a really good NRECA Co-op Governance Task Force report that happened during Curtis's time at NRECA that is worth sharing for folks to look over. But back to the lay of the land here and understanding your co-op. There are a few questions that are worth looking through as you're preparing to put together a campaign at your electric cooperative. There are a few questions around governance that are worth looking into. I think you all during the last session were given some homework. And Erin, maybe we could have folks talk now about if folks looked into, are your board meetings open at your electric cooperative? It'd be great to hear from anybody who did that homework.
Great. We can, yeah, let's go with Mary. Can you say a little bit about how that went?
All right, there. Can you hear me?
Mhm.
Okay. I was looking at all these things, and I've been attending the Golden Valley Electric Co-ops meetings for 2 years now. And I've become a member of the Member Advisory Council. I'm now on the nominating committee. And I have to say that GVA has been doing pretty darn well about transparency. Of all this list here, we do have members can talk during the meetings. They have 35% of their meetings are in executive session, and they go right into it right away with no public there. And that I've been kind of harping on them for a year and a half. And now when they do come out of the executive, they actually explain what they talked about, and they address every item in the executive session during the board meeting, which was a big change. So they have a really transparent but complicated website where you have to really dig to get to the charter, not the charter, the policies and all of that. But it's there. Another thing that I've really done the last 2 years that has been very effective is I write to all the board members personally after every meeting and say what I think went really well and what I would have questions about, because you can ask questions. And all of them know me by name now. And I think many of them keep saying, thank you for coming to the meetings. And I think it's been a lot of energy, but I think it's been very effective. So I'd recommend anybody, if they have the time, to go to those board meetings. Thank you.
That's wonderful, Mary. Thank you for sharing that. Bree, you can respond, but otherwise I can take a comment from Kay. Yeah? All right.
Mary, you're
there
so
we go.
lucky, and I really envy you. Our co-op board, electric co-op, is just totally impermeable. They say they print minutes in the newsletter, but it just looks like an agenda with no discussion, no motions, no knowing who voted how. They do not let us attend except for if we want to say something to them. We register days ahead of time and they let us say something. Then we have to leave again. They do not Zoom the meetings. They do not record the meetings. There are no minutes for the meetings that are accessible to us. It's like a great big wall.
Yeah, I after hearing what everybody else's story, I feel very lucky. I feel very lucky. Well, although I think there's always more to do, but good luck. That's all I can say is good luck.
Well, we really don't even know where to start because we can't contact each other. They don't allow that.
Elections?
There are elections and people can run, but you can't, if you want to send out more than just the standard statement, it costs something like $1,200 postage and printing.
Yeah, thanks for sharing, both of you. Is there one more that may want to share? Allie? Not accessible by Zoom? If you want to expand on that, just raise your hand, or anyone else. I know that transparency issues have come up in the previous call, and we will actually get into ways to apply pressure in the next call, in the next session. Um, Anyone else wants to share, just raise your hand. Otherwise, we can go back to Bri. And then also, if you did do any of the assignments and you needed to think about it a little bit and you want to type it in the chat, that's also great as well too.
Great, thanks, Erin. And Mary and Kay, really appreciate y'all's feedback on the homework assignment. And it sounds like you've already been looking into these things well before the last training session. So just appreciate your insight. And it totally varies by co-op, how open and accessible board meetings are, whether or not member owners can speak. And the same is true for running for the board of directors. We heard that example from Eugene about how impactful a really member owner responsive board can be. And I would say the same is true of a really, positive and cooperative CEO, how important having a really strong CEO at your co-op can be for bringing in programs to support member owners and who's driven to work with member owners that approach the electric cooperative with ideas or concerns, or programs that they want to have implemented. Having strong leadership can create for a really good opportunity to make change. And so one of the questions I have on this list, kind of down towards the bottom, like one of the first questions that I think is worth looking into if you want to see change at your co-op is what do I know about my board and about the CEO and how do I contact them? And that's information that you can find hopefully with some info available on the co-op website, but also by talking to other members in your community about the folks, who are on your board and about the CEO, like learning about what their interests are, where else they engage in the community, and then trying to make a connection. If there's opportunity to email your board member, you should take it. If there are direct ways to get in touch with the CEO, that can also be a really helpful tool for starting a conversation about changes that you want to make. Some of the other questions that I recommend looking into if you are trying to get a feel for what's going on at your co-op, where improvement might be needed, or also just how progressive is your co-op, looking into whether or not the co-op returns capital credits or dividends to their members. So electric cooperatives don't generate profit for shareholders. Any excess revenue is reinvested in the co-op, and then periodically it should be returned to member owners proportional to the amount of electricity that they purchased. Here in Tennessee, none of our co-ops return dividends. I think they often point to some state legislation as being a barrier to that, which I think some folks have questions about. But that's a good thing to look into. And then the overall question of whether or not finances are managed responsibly. Eugene shared an example of Tri-County Electric Cooperative in South Carolina, where member owners found out that the board was meeting excessively and otherwise misusing funds. There are places to go to try to figure out how the finances are being used, and we'll talk about that here in a bit. And then finally, looking into what programs and policies are already in place for affordable electricity or renewables, energy efficiency, things that can make your electricity access more resilient. If your co-op already has a lot of programs in place, that can be some indicator of what the existing leadership is like and whether or not they're going to be willing to work with you as a member owner on new ideas that you might bring to the table. So we can advance to the next slide. Where do you get this information? I'm going to hop into a few resources here in a minute, but just generally, and folks are welcome. We do have a few homework assignments this time that are specific, but if we share out the slides, you're welcome to work through that list of questions that I offered. And this is where you can get the information. So again, start by looking at the Electric Cooperative website. Hopefully, if your co-op is transparent and is actively trying to get information out to member owners, they will have information about the board meetings, about the programs they offer, who their CEO is, who the board is, other staff, information about the annual meeting, and also their rules and their bylaws all posted on the website. So that's a good place to start for a repository of information. Typically, too, if a co-op is really transparent, they will post 990s or their financial reports as well. The bylaws can be found on the website. Usually, the bylaws is like the Bible for your electric cooperative. The bylaws will lay out what the rules are for voting, for running for board. They will lay out a rule for quorum at the annual meeting, typically. The annual meeting is a one-time gathering of member owners, usually once a year, where the board is voted on, where bylaws can be changed if there's been a proposal to change the bylaws. And so within the bylaws, there's usually also information about how to change them. So there's a lot of really important governance details about your co-op in the bylaws, and usually details about how member owners can affect change. And there's more detail I can get into here in a minute. Also on the website, you should find a link to internal policies of the electric cooperative, as well as rules and regulation. These are some basic documents that give you detail around setting up your service, what your responsibilities are related to the power line that runs to your house and the right of way beneath, whether you have any opportunity to opt out of certain right of way management practices by the co-op. So there's like a lot of really basic nuts and bolts stuff about your service from the electric cooperative and your responsibilities as a member owner. In addition to these basic areas for finding information about the co-op, usually there will be additional media sources of some type. I'm not sure if this is true across the country, but here in the South, we have a cooperative living magazine in many states. And in that magazine, which comes out, I don't remember if it's monthly or quarterly, but there are a couple pages in the magazine that are specific to each electric cooperative, where updates are shared. A lot of times there will be recipes and something fun, a statement from the CEO about something that's happening. But you can often find important news in the magazine. Sometimes they'll post when the deadline is for board nominations, like when you need to be nominated by the committee, or get your signatures so that you can self-nominate. Things like that are notified in the magazine. So if you have something like that, I would recommend making sure that you're reading it regularly. Look for the pages for your co-op. And then, of course, some co-ops send out newsletters. Some co-ops have forums that they set up for conversation with member owners. You know, keep an eye out for any communications like that and opportunities to engage with your co-op leadership. 990s are a tool that can be used to identify financial information about your co-op. And I can share a link here in a bit, but ProPublica has a nonprofit explorer where you can look up your electric cooperative and pull the most recently filed 990, which is a financial report that your co-op sends into the IRS. And in the 990, you can find information about compensation, how revenue is used, major contracts that your co-op has with other companies. And I will go through a guide here in a minute to show you what some key questions are, or what some key information is that you can find in a 990. And then finally, I will say, there has been a pretty widespread effort by many organizations and member owners across the country to put together scorecards for their electric cooperatives. So I think Northern Plains Resource Council put together the first electric cooperative scorecard. Was that in North Dakota? Somebody can put that in the chat. I can't remember where it was. CURE in Minnesota, which is the org that Eugene works for, did a really great series of scorecards for the electric co-ops there. And there's been a big group of folks, 6 states or so in the Southeast, that have made scorecards. And then there's been some Midwest scorecards put together as well by a group called Good Neighbors Challenge, Green Neighbors Challenge, something to that effect. But these scorecards look at questions of how the co-op is performing on democratic governance, the programs that they offer, in addition to affordability and equity. And this is a place where organizations have already gone and done the research on a lot of the questions that I named before. and kind of looked at the co-op side by side to see how they're doing on their transparency and their governance, and are they making things accessible to member owners? Are they offering good programs? So I'll show you an example of one of those scorecards here briefly before the end. And I think I'm running short on time. I don't know if there's been a Colorado scorecard, Connie. We can see if somebody else knows of one, and we could put it in the chat. But I am going to briefly show y'all. Actually, let me scroll up to the top of this. A couple of documents that we're going to send out after the meeting. So, okay, I'm going to try to share my screen here, y'all. So this is a guide that my organization worked on in partnership with member owners from one of the electric cooperatives in Northeast Tennessee. The member owners had been organizing in this co-op for several years and made a lot of really positive change. They were able to get their board meetings open. They got new policies in place at the co-op. They developed relationships with the CEO and with some of the board. Some of them ran for board. They didn't win, but they were super duper engaged and working across several counties. Actually, this co-op serves part of Virginia too. But anyways, they wanted to put together a guide for helping new folks coming into the work to understand what's happening at their co-op. So they were handing these out at community meetings that we were holding at community centers in different counties. So within this guide, it's specific to this electric cooperative, but you can use it to model your research at your electric co-op. And in fact, if anyone on this call is interested in using this material to make a guide specific to your co-op, you are totally welcome to. Just reach out to me and I can help set that up. But in it, I'm going to go to 2 pages. We have a lot in here. You know, we made charts. So when we first started organizing at this co-op, these folks didn't even have, their co-op didn't have a website. They just had a bill pay portal. And we had no information about what the districts were for the board of directors. I don't think there was a copy of the bylaws online. They had to go into the office and get a hard copy. There was just a lot of missing information. And one of the things that they were able to do was get a lot of information online by pressuring their co-op to do that. But anyways, we made this guide, and one of the documents in here is around what to look for in your bylaws. Sorry, so we have a guide here that talks about the kind of content that's in the bylaws around the board elections, around the nomination process, how to call a special meeting, which is a tool that member owners have used to bring all the member owners together and vote on something at their own initiative. There's a process for doing that if you have something major going on at your co-op. There's information about how to vote and how to amend the bylaws within the bylaws themselves. So we had some information about, you know, what these different things do, and then we gave some context for what the rules for this particular co-op say in their bylaws. But again, you all can use this to model. And then we also have a document here about how to read a 990. As I said before, this is a financial form that's filed to the IRS that your co-op submits every year. And within it, you can find some really useful information. You can look at where their revenue is coming from, like revenue that might come from outside of electricity sales, for instance. You can look at who the contractors are that they are setting up contracts with, who are the top paid contractors that they're sending money to. Sometimes that can be really insightful information depending on what kind of projects your co-op is working on. And then there's also information about compensation in here. So if you're a member owner that has concerns about how the board might be paying themselves, you can look at this compensation line and see how much money they're getting. Not saying that that's always going to be an issue, but like in the case of Tri-State in South Carolina, it was a major issue. So this document is important. And there are other tools in this guide. You all, again, are welcome to look through. And if folks have questions, I will be on the office hours next week. I think it's Monday. And I want to just stop sharing for a second, maybe. Okay, my screen sharing is paused and I'm trying to get to a different page, but I'm having a hard time seeing because of this toolbar. Okay. Okay. All right, this will be really quick. This is one of the Southeast scorecards that I referenced before. We did these across several states, and we tried to work together to identify like what are the standards that we would want to set for electric cooperatives in our region in the Southeast in terms of how they should be performing on questions around governance and the programs that they offer. Um, I will say, just as a caveat, across the entire Southeast, none of the co-ops really did very well on this scorecard. I think they would consider the standards that we set pretty high. The advocacy orgs that worked on this, there were many organizations that worked on it. We were just looking at what we thought would be best practice for member owners, and a lot of that was based in the governance task force report and learnings that we had gathered from working with member owners over the years on different campaigns, what some practices were at like municipal utilities, for examples. So, anyways, here you can see that we scored all of the electric cooperatives in Tennessee. We have their scores listed. And then,
Hey, Bri, we're actually still seeing that previous document that you were sharing.
oh, okay. Uh, Thanks for letting me know. Can you see this? Can you see this now?
No, you're gonna have to stop sharing your screen and now yeah, reshare. Yep.
Okay, sorry about that. Um, okay, here's where we scored all of the electric cooperatives in Tennessee. For governance, we looked at their board meeting transparency, whether or not there was access to the board members. Are the elections democratic? Are the bylaws democratic? Is there financial transparency? And we have a methodology page, so you can look at what questions we use, like what was the top possible score. Then we looked at scoring for member services. We asked questions about, is there a medical exemption from disconnection? Is there an opt-out for spraying beneath right-of-way lines? Because that was been a big issue in some parts of the South. Do they offer broadband internet? Do they have low fixed fees or basic service charges at the co-ops? What are their solar policies like? What do they offer for financing around weatherization and energy efficiency? And again, we have a methodology page for this as well. So you can use these scorecards as a tool, again, to think about like how well is your co-op already performing on governance? If they have really open policies, that's an opportunity for you to engage with the leadership of your co-op pretty positively, at the beginning of your campaign. If they have really good, and if they're missing the programs, you can start at the governance level and start engaging and advocating for different programs. If you're seeing that there's a lot of progressive programs, but the governance has a way to go, you can utilize that information to think about a strategy for maybe thanking your co-op leadership for some of the things they're doing on the services side, and then working with them to improve the governance to make it more open and transparent. So I just crammed a lot in and went over time. I'm going to stop now and pass it over to Dave, but thanks y'all, and I'm glad to answer questions later.
Great, thanks, Bree. And Dave, yeah, do you want your slides up?
Yeah, sure. Just the first one would be great. Hi, everybody. I'm Dave Munk. I'm a board member. Looks like we have a few Coloradans out here. Welcome to everybody. And I've been on the Holy Cross Energy Board, which is in Western Colorado, for 16 years and served 5 years as board chair, like Aaron mentioned. What I wanted to do tonight is just kind of build on the listen, build relationships, understand your co-op, but come at this from the board perspective. So what's a board member here to do, and just share some of, my experience and perspective. And again, this is my perspective. And there's a saying in the co-op world that if you've met one co-op, you've met one co-op. And so everything is completely unique to your situation. That's why the getting to know your co-op, getting to know your other members, identifying what issues are important to your members and communities is so critical. But backing up from that, zooming out to the high level, as an elected director, I have a fiduciary responsibility to the organization as a whole. Our co-op is a a medium-sized co-op in Colorado and nationally. We've got somewhere around 50,000 members. That's a $120 million a year business. So that's a pretty serious responsibility as a fiduciary, which is what we're referred to. So that's why I thought I'd put this up here, just to let you know that this is kind of the guiding perspective of how we roll. I'll try and if there's time, I'll try to roll through and get through an example of how this flies through. So with this in the background and this obligation to run the co-op in the best interest financially and of all members, um, then what we do here next is we go to a mission statement that was reflective and designed by the co-op itself. And so if you can go to the next slide, you'll see that most of these mission statements reference safe, reliable, and affordable electricity. An increasing amount includes sustainability, but this is the original mission for electric co-ops in the first place. This is what we're here to do. And so that kind of ties into this fiduciary responsibility that, a lot of boards will focus on or cling to maybe in some cases. But this is where the rubber meets the road and where a lot of the accountability and the assessment of how well a co-op is doing is based on when you're inside the industry. Now, as many of you are familiar, you'll take this mission and then build a vision statement. I don't know how many co-ops do that. My guess is not too many. But this is ours. And you can see that where we've got a very mixed membership, it's very fortunate to be an activist here, because we've got a mix of people that want clean energy and we're pushing for it pretty hard. And then you've got a lot of basic folks that just really want reliable electricity that's affordable. And so that word, out of our vision, one of the most important words is the word responsible. And that's what ties back to that fiduciary responsibility and to the mission statement, because that's what brings it all together. So as a director, irrespective of what I may feel personally, or even the constituents that I represent, the decisions I need to make, I need to keep in mind the interests of the membership as a whole. So that's, this kind of sets the stage for what Bri was talking about, is getting to know your CEO, getting to know your board members, getting a sense of what the leadership looks like and what they are like and how responsive they are, or how they roll. Because you think back to the examples that Eugene offered. You've got a big contrast. You got Tri-County, where there was a scandal, gets everybody fired up, they vote everybody out, and then they're starting from square one, right? And then they have to build a culture, a new culture, because the old culture was really corrupt. Then you've got, and I really appreciate what Bri mentioned on top of the great example of Roanoke, because it's a shining star, right? And that takes years to put together. But that's the outcome that could be your vision as an activist, is a functional relationship with your board and organization where the interests of your members are being, represented. So that's just kind of frames it in a way that I think is really important, because there's the uniqueness of each co-op. There's the importance of understanding their culture, and what the issues are. And so turning back to how we uh, conduct business at Holy Cross, we take this mission statement, and then the board, working with the staff, develops a set of strategic priorities, and we have a published strategic plan. I'm not sure if that's part of the scorecard. I would suggest it'd be a great addition if it's not, because that's a very public representation of what the priorities are of the board, and it gives the membership something to react to. And so, as a board member, going back to our role, the board identifies the what. What do we want to accomplish in terms of trying to achieve our vision and staying aligned with our mission, right? And then the staff is responsible for the how. So they come to us with work plans every year that reflect our strategic priorities. Now, this is a highly organized way to go about it. Uh, but I'll say this: it's taught by NRACA for all as part of their credentialed certified cooperative director basic education program that they provide and offer to any new director. So I just wanted to flag those. And I guess I'll use our clean energy goals as an example because that was our top priority. And so that, many folks have goals of transparency. Affordability, I think, is ubiquitous. It's everywhere, and it's even higher right now. Some of the transparency, there's some governance issues in certain areas of the country as well. But in our area and in many others, and this relates to the tri-state issue that Eugene teed up there, there's concern about trying to clean up our fuel mix. And the G&Ts, the generation and transmission co-ops that most distribution co-ops like mine purchase from, those typically rely on aging fossil fuel plants. And so there's a real focus on cooperatives due to our nimbleness and energy democracy potential, let's just say, to try and clean them up. So in 2017 and 2018, 2017, we hired a new CEO. And having this as an objective, which had already been part of our goals as a board and an organization for a few years rolling into that, we hired a CEO that was aligned with that priority. And then what we did is we elevated this in a strategic plan. And then in 2018, we identified a 30% by 2030, 70% by 2030 goal. And this was done to sort of balance the ambitions of the board and done in conjunction with the staff, but also keeping in mind that responsible and the affordable words that you see on the screen there. And so that kind of balance and give and take and collaboration is, I think, the hallmark of an effective organization. We then updated it in 2020 to go for 100 by 2030. And setting these types of goals was reflective of the will of the membership as evidenced by the board. But at the same time, we didn't just abandon the affordability. So our rates are still very low. This is another one of our strategic priorities is to keep our rates in the lowest third, and we're one of the lowest two co-ops in the state. Now, there are a lot of reasons for that, but just wanted to identify or just kind of share this story as an illustration of the process that we went through. So I guess in the interest of time, I'll close it there and flip it over to Kyle.
Hey, thank you so much, Dave. And likewise, I'm going to be very quick because I'd rather hear y'all's questions than hear myself talk. I've got 4 slides, and you're just going to get the teaser trailer for each one. Now, Bri and all of our speakers have given you some wonderful tools. I'm about to show you another one. I don't have time to get into it tonight, but I'll be on I plan to be on the office hours Monday if you want to learn more. And we're also going to share as part of the materials a how-to sheet for this tool that I'm going to tell you about. But of course, I'm here to talk about energy affordability. And I believe in putting words in notes rather than on slides. So when you get the slides, be sure to drill down into my notes section. I'm just going to give you the teaser for this slide. Co-ops were created to solve a problem, and affordability is the next one. Read all about it in the notes. Next slide, please. LEAD is, as you can see, the Low Income Energy Affordability Data Tool. And y'all, quite frankly, I'm amazed that this tool is still up. It's on DOE, the U.S. Department of Energy, energy.gov, links and everything. But this is an amazing tool. And my teaser in the notes for this slide is high bills aren't inevitable, they're solvable. Next slide, please. This is an example of what you see in the low income energy affordability tool. Various divisions, states, counties, census tracts, tribal areas are colored based on how affordable or unaffordable your energy is. And as you can see, the definitions for energy burden and energy poverty are here on this slide, but I don't need to tell you if you're struggling to pay your bills. But this tool can help your co-op identify areas that need emphasis. Next slide, please. So affordability is an abstract. It's about real household budgets, and transparency and participation are part of the affordability. I've got more in the notes, but this is a great tool I mean, like I say, if you're struggling to pay your bill, but this is a great tool for you to identify other areas for co-op and citizen-based focus. And I'll leave it there. Back to you, Aaron.
Great. Thank you all. Yeah. So we knew we had a lot of content today. And we kind of hit it close to the hour, but we would like to spend some time answering a few questions. And then also, as you have seen me dropping in the chat, all of these resources will be available on our learning portal Canvas. And then I'll email out more information about it as well, and how to like log into Canvas. And if you have any issues, feel free to contact me. But before we do a bit of Q&A, if people do have time to stay, we have a couple more assignments. And so those are further steps you can take in order to kind of really get acclimated with your co-op and understand how it works and where there might be room for improvement. So can I send that over to Bri? Yeah, I'll send it over to Bri for assignment option A.
Yes, I'll actually do both, Aaron.
Okay.
And Dave can follow up if we need. But okay, I see you put it in there. Right. So here's one assignment for you. Go see if you can find information about your co-op's annual meeting. I said this during my part of the presentation, but the annual meeting is a gathering of the member owners. Usually happens once a year. It's annual. A lot of times they're kind of like a fair, but this is where big stuff happens. Voting for board members, voting on bylaw changes. So you can take a look at your co-op website or your co-op magazine and see if you can figure out when is your annual meeting going to happen. Actually, that information is also sometimes in the bylaws as well. If it happens, third week of whatever month every year, sometimes that is specified. So see if you can find information about the upcoming meeting and potentially a recap of the previous year's meeting. The second assignment that we want to offer, so you can choose one of these two options. See if you can find the rules for how to run for the board of directors and how the elections are held. So again, this usually happens, the voting for the board of directors happens at the annual meeting, but there are also rules around how board nominees get nominated. There might be a nominating committee. You may also be able to gather signatures in order to nominate yourself to run for the board. And then look at the voting options. Can you vote by mail? Does proxy voting happen where the co-op board can use proxy votes from some of the member owners to vote however they would like? That can be a big barrier to winning board campaigns. So this information should be in your co-op bylaws, or could also be in some of the other communication methods, but I would start in the bylaws to look for those rules. And I'll stop there.
Great. And I know we have a couple questions, but just a quick shout out for next week and for the office hours on Monday at the same time. We will have, at the same time being the same time as this call, we will have office hours. You'll get an email about that. And then next week's session is mobilizing people and applying popular pressure. And so please be there for it. Dave, you have a question? And then I know there's a couple questions in the chat that we wanted to get to as well.
Yep, I'll just be real quick, just to add on to what Bree said in framing those assignments, that feel free to also look at the any other means of communication between the co-op and its membership. Are there newsletters? Is there a magazine like what Bree mentioned? Do they run ads? When I joined our board, it was just the official announcements as required by law and by bylaws in the newspaper. That was it, like a police blotter. That was the end of it. And so that gives you a good indication of what's going on and how open these types of things are. The other plug I want to make, just because I'm on the call today, is that running a candidate is so valuable because it gives, even that person has no chance, that just get after it, just like in general public elections, because it gives voice to the issues and it attracts people of like interests. You will build a movement. So that was it. And just to consider those pieces otherwise. The other sources as you get to know your co-op. Thanks.
Yep. Just, while people are still on the call, I know Aisha had asked a question and was being very patient about it. And the question is, are you considered a member owner if you're not a household owner? If you pay an electric bill, but your name is not on it. I know there's some nuance to that sometimes.
Yeah, I mean, sometimes there can be like dual member ownership for spouses, and that's specified in the bylaws, but I've not heard of somebody else just living in the household being considered a member owner, if they're not the person whose name is on the meter or married to the person whose name is associated with the bill for the meter.
Yep. Um, if there are any other questions, and folks have a few seconds, a few minutes to please drop them in the chat. Also, I'm dropping in this office hours form. Even if you can't make it on Monday, this is going to be useful for us to sense like what the issues are that you're facing, and we might be able to either, not sure if we'll reach out directly, but we'll at least post some answers on Canvas. So I'm dropping the office hours form in the chat here. You don't have to fill it out right at this moment, but if you could just like leave it open, maybe fill it out when you have a second, that would be really useful for everyone involved. Was there any other question that's
Yeah, I've
pressing?
got yeah, this is Tom. I got a question. Bree, you talked about finding the 990s from the co-ops, and sometimes they may be on the website, maybe not. Do you have a suggestion for folks that want to try to find those 990s, but they're not posted on the website? Is there a way to find those on a government site or something else like that?
I just put the link in. So ProPublica has a nonprofit explorer, and you can type in the name of your co-op. Sometimes if there are multiple co-ops across the country that have similar names, there might be a slight variation of your co-op's name that is needed to identify it within this explorer, but you can pull up the 990 here. And if folks have trouble finding their co-op in here, they can come to the office hours and we can help you.
We have Chris with a hand up.
Hey, thanks so much to all the presenters. I just wanted to offer up a quick and easy potential assignment. I worked on the scorecards for Energy Democracy Y'all, and I made a few of the calls. And it's amazing what you can learn by just asking a couple questions and seeing how the co-op responds. If you can't find the answer, give your co-op a call and ask them the question and see how they respond. You might be surprised or you might be disappointed.
Right. And okay, Connie has been also, I noticed there was one thing we didn't respond to, but uh something about the annual meetings themselves are at inaccessible times, and the board meetings as well are at inaccessible times. It looks like 9 a.m. Any response from any of the presenters on experiences with that, approaches to it? I think we kind of touched on it.
Well, I'll chime in. Our board meets every month for about 6 hours. It's, a big, big organization. And so it takes a bunch of time. We've tried to make it more accessible, but it's really a consideration. It's also a factor that affects the eligibility and interest of potential board directors. Because if you've got a full-time job, you've got to look carefully at whether you can really rally for that. Or if you own your own business, for example, it takes a bunch of time. So it's a quandary. We also have our annual meeting at about 5:30 or 6 on a early summer evening. We try to schedule ours when school is just out, so it's in early June. But it's tricky, and it's just a matter of engagement, I think, is the best I can offer to start to help try to shift things around but really appreciate your engagement, and that's the path to progress with a co-op.
Yep. Thank you. I know we have run over time. We will have office hours on Monday. Um, and then we will have, the session number 3 on Thursday, and then the future session the following Thursday. The survey, yes, someone asked about the survey. I will drop the link in here again. And also when sending out the recording and transcript, which will hopefully be tomorrow, I will send the survey as well. There we go. Great. I think that's good for today. We have much more to cover in future sessions and during office hours, so I hope to see you all there.